One of my old university lecturers wrote a book called Act Utilitarianism, Bad and Wrong, which I thought was a pretty cool title for a book. And I think I would use those words to describe what we conventionally call objectification. It's bad and it's wrong. It's incorrect, it's inaccurate, it fails to appreciate something real about our situation as human beings, which is simply that we are not objects. We are subjects to a life. We have an experience of living, and we cannot be reduced to the objects that we experience. You may experience having a body, but you are not that body. You are that which experiences that body. And so for me to reduce you entirely to your body is illicit, it is inaccurate, it is missing something, it is a mistake. And it is, in a very literal sense, objectification. I am negating your subject and instead treating you as if you are the object that I perceive you to be. And that is quite foolish. The actual process of objectification in perceptual terms is merely a function of the operation of the eyes. But the eyes are as fascinating and complex and magical as they kind of are also incredibly limited. I mean, we perceive about 1/10 of a millionth of the electromagnetic spectrum, and our eyes are just a section of that along with our other senses. And so for me to assume that they really convey to me who you really are is a little bit silly. It is like an ant with their antennae doing the same, thinking that they understand the truth of who you are when they prod your skin with their antenna. It's just too limited as a perceptual tool to really grasp the nature of another person. And that's why objectification is reductionist. It misses the reality of who the other person is. Now, this term objectification has pretty much been monopolized by feminist theory, and not without good reason. But I think often the term is used in a fairly superficial way. It simply talks about not using people as if they are objects and forgetting that they also have a subjective experience. And of course, that is important advice. We should always remember the subjective experiences of those we interact with, have empathy with them and compassion for them. I think this is a very important thing. But I think it's also important to rally against objectification in this much more fundamental kind of metaphysical sense, and not just with reference to other people, but also to ourselves. I think it was maybe Kierkegaard or Wittgenstein, I forget, one of these great minds said that the interesting thing about human beings is that they are subjects trying to understand themselves as if they are objects. And we do that. We self-objectify. And by doing so, I think we kind of lose touch with who we really are, actually, with the truth of our existence as a subject to a life, as a being, that in some sense does transcend the objects of experience that it encounters. And there are a number of interesting implications of that maybe we will discuss elsewhere. Why do we self-objectify, I wonder? We like to feel different to other people, and if you get in touch with the subjective nature of being, I think one of the issues people struggle with is that there's not very much to define it. If you are not the object of experience and you're to understand the nature of the subject by negating objects of experience, then you're left with a kind of nothingness, a kind of emptiness. Perhaps this is what sunyata refers to in Buddhism, perhaps not. But I'm quite sure that in Hegel's work and in Sartre, this is what they're getting at. They talk about the emptiness of the subject, being and nothingness, and such the like. But by virtue of that, there's not very much difference between you and I. In fact, my unpopular opinion of the day is that actually there is no difference between you and I. It's just that we experience different objects of perception, but the actual perceiver, the subject, there's nothing that can be different. There's no male nor female about it. There's no shape to it. There's no object that can differentiate. You may experience having a black body, and I experience having a white body, but the actual subject that experiences having those bodies is neither black nor white, neither male nor female. So, why then do we cling to these differences? I think so much of it is because we like to feel superior to other people, and without those differences that is impossible. I think a lot of people find the idea that they are the equal to all other human beings and equal to the cockroach, who of course is also subject to a life and also just experiences having a cockroach body. I think they find that hard to manage, hard to work with, and perhaps even hard for their self-esteem and ego, which often depends, unfortunately, on looking down at other people. I would say that of all of the beliefs that I put above others, it is that of equality based on the nature of the perceiving subject. It must be equal. It must be equal because there's no difference between you and I. We might talk about how our bodies are not equal, maybe, in terms of, I don't know, the various subjective values that we construct. Certainly some bodies are valued more than others. I mean, that's not something we can really dispute, as much as we perhaps wish it were otherwise. But the actual being, the actual person, the actual subject to a life must be equal because it is the same. It must be equal because all values are constructed anyway. I'm a bit of a nihilist. I'm not going to lie. I'm a bit of a nihilist, and one of the positive outcomes, if you will, or the payoffs or benefits of nihilism is that by definition, if there are no objective values, everyone must be equal because there's no objective standard by which one person can be more or less valuable than another. I digress. In any case, I think it's really important to think about objectification, about how we objectify other people through the functioning of the eyes, and how and why we objectify ourselves when we are fundamentally not objects. We are subjects to a life, to experience. And that is what I'll leave this video for you to think about. Yes.